All right, Kevin, back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I am here with my friend Patrick Coffey. Patrick, welcome, man. So awesome to have you today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, man, this goes, I look at, mine and your relationship goes
Mhm.
all the way back to about 2004. Man, that's almost 20 years, man, when
Yeah.
Matt Fury originally connected you and I. And
Yep.
and so a lot of water under the bridge since you and I met for sure. And what was cool
Exactly.
is in preparing for this podcast, I know I had messaged you and like, hey, can you send your bio over to me? And you sent me a link to your website, your about page on your website. And after reading it, I'm like, I knew some of this, but I didn't know all these details. And this, you have had just, I mean, a heck of a ride since '02 and stuff.
Yeah.
And so what I'd like to do is just kind of, start off by, just turn over to you to share a little bit of your background, what you do,
Mhm.
who you serve, what inspires you most about what you do, and we'll just kind of set some context for everybody and let everybody know who is Patrick Coffey.
Yeah. No, happy to do that. And that makes sense because, part of my entrepreneurial journey was actually almost by accident. And, I covered that a little bit in the bio is
Uh-huh.
when I started after college, my degree was actually in healthcare administration. So healthcare administration degree is basically somebody who's in a doctor's office or hospital running the business end of, the practice, the hospital. I thought it was a good path to go down to. I think it's probably a wonderful path for some people. But, I graduated college. I'm used to hanging out with my buddies, maybe drinking a little more than I should, getting into trouble. And, I get home and I'm living in my parents' house. I'm like, you know what? Interviewing for jobs, some great opportunities, recruiting for nursing and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not quite ready for this. I need to like work myself into the work world, transition easily. So I wound up applying for this job as a customer service representative, which happened to be a small direct response company. Well, actually, a very large direct response company, but it was a small startup within that large direct response company. I
Okay.
was actually employee number three. The name of the company was called Early to Rise, which is part of the larger Agora Publishing, which I'm sure many of your listeners know about. I
Yep.
think billion plus revenue, been around very long time. And it was just a great place to be. Like I said, I was employee number three. So you were allowed to do lots of different things and figure stuff out. And our boss at the time was, one of the partners in Agora Publishing, Mark Ford, who I'm sure some of your listeners are familiar with,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize who he was at the time, but basically a direct response legend from direct mail days. And now, as this company is transitioning into their kind of online publishing email background and trying to bring that direct response knowledge to the internet. So it's just kind of really getting on that ground floor level of understanding what to do. And they really let us goof up, make a lot of mistakes. Like the other two people who work with me, this girl Lisa and Will Bonner, who's actually Bill Bonner's son, were
Okay.
the other two employees. And we were kids, we were in our early 20s and kind of given a lot of advice from Mark and great advice, but also like we were given a long leash. So we
Okay.
were allowed to go out and do things. And that's kind of where I got into marketing, being on the front end of the customer side. I think it was 3 months in or so. They're like, hey, you're doing a great job. We love what you're doing. Where do you see yourself going? What do you want to do next within this? And I'm like, oh, I kind of dig this internet marketing stuff. And I like what we're doing on the email side. I'd love to explore that more.
Uh-huh.
And, one of the big things I did with that was, and I know your whole thing is about relationships, and this was a great learning experience and served me well for even to this day was a lot of Agora was mostly financial and health publishers. We were
Okay.
kind of a hybrid. We did some finance, some health, but we were kind of more of a self-help, entrepreneurial, some biz op type stuff. So we kind of didn't fit in that box and we didn't really have partners of lists to rent. And so what I did is I spent a lot of my day just cold emailing people, trying to call people, make relationships, offer value to them in terms of what we could offer with our list and help them attract new customers. And, just made a lot of great relationships that way, and really kind of helped build my, what became later my business and my entrepreneurial path. I probably wouldn't have one known about direct response internet marketing, that's for sure. And being that our company was about entrepreneurship and starting business and growing, like it really opened my eyes. And it started out as kind of an entrepreneur type thing within that business.
Yeah, yeah. So if we fast forward, so I mean, you started going down this path. You and I mean, really close timelines. I mean, I think you started doing your thing with these guys in '02, and I started doing well, I mean, I had my first website going at that time. I mean, that the ugliest, probably one of the ugliest websites on the internet, Get Mold Solutions, it's still there. And
Yep.
not a dang thing is happening there, but I leave it there just because I want to remember my roots. So you can still go check out. There's remnants of it still there to this
And
day.
if somebody pops in, you could sell a lead to somebody, right?
I mean, there's fields still there where people can opt in, but there's nothing tied to it anymore. So even if
Yeah.
nothing's going to happen, and but and then in 2004 is when I really started like
Mhm.
taking off with this thing, and so you and I
Yeah.
were on really similar timelines as far as getting started, and just really just falling in love with this whole marketing thing and stuff.
No, absolutely. And that's kind of like what happened was as I grew with that company, I stayed with that company until early 2008.
Okay.
And one of the things that kind of was a driver for me was I'm in this kind of entrepreneurial focused company, start a business, do this. And certainly I knew a lot about, P&Ls, running the business, marketing, relationships. But I would speak at these events. We did all these conferences. We did this annual boot camp that was a $2,000 event. We did a $5,000 event in I think Denver a few times where it was like you went in one day and then at the end of the week you had your own like website web business set up. It was a really cool event, but I knew all the marketing, I knew all the stuff, and I would speak at these events, and I kind of felt like a little bit of a fraud, even though
Uh-huh.
I knew I was giving good information. I'm like, yeah, I know this stuff, but what the hell am I? I'm not a, if this is so great, why don't you have your own business? Why aren't you kind of doing your own thing? So that's kind of where I spun off in 2008,
Gotcha.
kind of
And
first thing.
so what, get us up to date. What has happened since then, and what are you doing right now?
Uh, well, this is the thing. It's really kind of changed a lot.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of different things that we're doing. Probably multiple different businesses that have little stakes in and big
Okay.
stakes in across the board. As I think when we first met, I was kind of more of a spinoff of my original business I work with. We were creating courses on, how to make money on the internet, how to, some self-improvement stuff, some trading, and we were kind of just selling courses, doing direct response marketing, building our audience and kind of connecting, doing a lot of JV marketing, which is mainly how we connected,
Yep.
in
Yep.
a big, financial way at least, was kind of cross promoting each other's stuff. And
Yeah.
that was big. And then kind of I was always very good at building email lists. It was
Okay.
always like, even back to when I was with Early Rise, we had built several lists of, you know, 400, 500,000 subscribers, multiple times over.
Okay.
Continue to have them even within our, kind of biz op space. We had a very large and responsive email list. And what happened was, as you know, on the product and offer creation side, it's a wonderful business, but it's hard. I felt like I was constantly on a roller coaster. You have a promo that's kicking ass and you're riding that wave up, but you need to have that next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Otherwise, because it has a cycle, it's going to come down again eventually. And that's what you kind of deal with. So we're constantly spinning our wheels. And, as when you have a home run, it's great and you keep pushing and you get another one. But you hit a couple of singles or some losers in a row, you start doubting yourself and all this stuff creeps in, which, a lot of entrepreneurs deal with. Like,
Yep.
hey, was I a fraud? Did I get lucky? Did I,
That's
but
right.
really you just got to get back to work. And that was one of the things we did, is kind of got back to work on focusing on the email list building side. I'm like, all right, well, we're very good at acquiring leads and building email lists. Why don't I focus on that? And we pivot from a product model to an ad model. So
Okay.
we wound up building multiple lists in the 300, 400,000 range. Our database was probably, even to this day, over 2 million plus names of multiple lists, and
Yep.
just kind of selling advertising.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the primary business I'm focused on, but also have some stuff in the software side, some other investing stuff. And actually, just recently, late, very, very late last year, like the 31st, a partner of mine, we actually acquired an e-commerce Shopify business. So
Okay.
getting back into that product realm again, but a little different. And we're really excited about that.
It's really fascinating, Patrick. You talk about, building email lists, and you've definitely got a skill set in that. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
sure people listening going like, "Wow, email lists of 2 or 300,000 and
Mhm.
million total." I remember, I think Bill Harris, but before he passed away,
Mhm.
we ended up meeting, and him and I did a strategic partnership together and stuff. And I'll tell you what, man, Bill sends an email to his list. Now there's some horsepower right there,
Yeah, for sure.
and it was really something to experience because me being the guy that he was putting in front of his
Mhm.
people. I mean, he sent a single email out. We did this teleseminar presentation for his folks, and in about 24 hours, we had produced 187,000 in revenue. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, and that is the value of the right relationships right there,
Mhm.
because the right relationships with the right people just allows us to just make a huge impact. I mean, we can do so
Mhm.
much more together partnering with the
Yep.
right people than we could ever do on our own.
Absolutely.
And well, let's shift gears just a little bit here. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate the question for the benefit of the listeners. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And Patrick,
Yeah,
I'm just
absolutely. And there's definitely multiple people. I think one of them I talked about earlier, Mark Ford, big role model for me. If it wasn't for him, I kind of wouldn't be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have known what this path was, and being involved in that business was a very big thing.
Mhm.
Some other ones is after I had broken out on my own, I was still doing a little bit of consulting. And I don't know if you remember this guy. His name was Jeff Paul.
I
He
remember
did.
him.
He was a big infomercial guy.
Yes.
I think back in the '90s and maybe early 2000s, it was like how to make $10,000. How I made $10,000 a month in my at my kitchen table in my underwear.
Yep.
Late night type stuff, and he was doing a bunch of stuff, and I had worked with him kind of while I was starting my own thing. And I think one of the important things I really learned from him more than anything is he was a great marketer, but was just like the power of pushing and scale and how to like really grow. And we dealt with that when I worked with Agora, but I felt like, hey, I'm part of a larger company. Like, we're just kind of, they have lots of money to throw at this. Let's, we're going to do it how we do it. But this was kind of in this situation, it was a single entrepreneur doing an online thing, had a team, but wasn't a massive team, and was still like, how do we get 1,000 buyers a day, 2,000, and made me realize like, hey, you got to push this thing, especially if you got something that's working,
Mm.
really kind of keep that going.
Yeah.
Um, Another person that's kind of been good is we had met. Actually, he was in Matt Fury's group with us, and I think that may have been. No, that's not right. I first met him was at a Stephen Pierce event,
Okay.
and this was in like Detroit in January at the airport or something. It was like a who's who of marketing. Like no one knew who anybody was at the time. But
Uh-huh.
if you go back and look at it, was like everybody you could think of was there. And the person I had met there was Mark Evans, who was also
Oh yeah.
in Matt Fury's group. And we've always been in touch, over the years, kind of hanging out here and there when we would kind of connect. And, just in the last, I think 5 or 6 years, we had kind of reconnected, and we've kind of partnered in a few different businesses and, invested in that e-com thing and a few other investments, some good, some bad, but
Yep.
mostly good. We're entrepreneurs. We're taking swings at things and trying to, go for the fences on these. So a lot of good has come from that. But I think the main one I'll focus on, it's kind of one person, but I'm going to really focus on what is when I left Early to Rise. One of my catalysts for leaving, kind of giving me the courage to do it, was there was this copywriter that we work with there, a very successful guy who had written multiple promos. His name was James Sheridan.
Okay.
And one of the promos, probably the most famous promo he had written, was something called the Insider Code. And this was even before kind of the video sales letters. People kind of did webinars, but not really. And it was a $2,000 Forex trading course that we were almost able to sell to cold lists on the front end. It did incredible. It was gangbusters. And he had written numerous packages, and we had talked, over time about, hey, how do we partner up and start a business together? Hey, you have the copywriting chops. Yeah, I have the list building, kind of marketing chops. We get these two things together, we got a home run here. So let's kind
Um,
of get this going. And as we're doing that, this is about in 2008. I'm talking with James, and he wants to bring in a third partner to this business. And it's a guy I'd met before, just nice guy. I didn't really think too much of him, one way or the other is really cool, but didn't really know a lot about him. And his name was Mark Baker.
okay.
And Mark Baker, he kind of had more of a skill set of operational, understanding the technical systems, all the odds and ends that have to be done that us kind of crazy marketing entrepreneurial types don't think about or focus on enough. They just kind of push
Uh,
in one direction. All right, let's go. And then you need somebody who's there to kind of figure out, okay, you crazy person,
yes.
here's
Yes.
how this actually will work or not work. And he had gotten brought in, and I'm like, all right, cool. Seems like a good guy. And we've kind of just worked together, and that business has grown and taken on many different forms. And James, like, we had parted ways with him, kind of a few years into that process, which it was, friendly and mutual. But the interesting thing is this relationship with Mark is still one of my top relationships today. We're in business together. That particular business is going to be 15 years old in
Wow.
about a month, right?
Wow. Wow.
So I've spent almost as much time with him as I've spent with my wife,
Uh,
in terms of been together.
yeah.
I think we dated a little bit. We haven't been married 15 years, but we dated a bit longer than that. And it's just been such a great relationship on so many levels, just because we're committed together. We have a great working relationship. Like I said, that business has evolved many times over into becoming many different things. Even within that, we've started separate businesses together. Some failed, some great.
Mhm.
And it's just been such a good working relationship. I don't know where I would be without that. And it was very much an accidental thing, not something I was thinking of like, hey, let's bring this other guy on. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and honestly, without that, I probably wouldn't be where I'm at today. So it was I thank James for helping me and giving me the courage. And I thank James for introducing me to Mark.
You bet. You bet.
Yeah.
And isn't that, I mean, I've had so many of the same experiences that it was just this kind of natural, this organic thing where we got connected with somebody that all of a sudden it was just such a fit. It was
Yeah.
just such alignment with who we are and the way we want to show up that this
Mhm.
person just complements us and great things come from it. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what you just shared.
Yeah, and it's like, even to this day, one of the things I value most is that it's such a great working relationship.
Yeah.
Not that we don't ever have hard conversations, we do, and we'll bump heads, but you know what? We're always working to the solution and the end goal.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's so I feel like the operational side of things could get very undervalued at times. sometimes these marketers try to think, well, I'm the rainmaker. I'm the one who's bringing the money and figure out. But like these systems break, like you don't have a business anymore.
That's right. That's right.
Especially on the email side, email delivery, like that could go wrong in a heartbeat. And I've been in that space for a long time, and we've seen good, bad, neutral, and that's a lot of work, especially when you're talking about millions of names, how to keep that delivering and delivering effectively. It's a lot of work. Plus, a big thing about this is these are massive contracts that we're going to into with some of our partners here on these, ESPs and other software sides. And it's good to have somebody who's got the skin in the game
Yep.
to know like, hey, this is a big decision where, not that I'm saying we have great staff, great employees in all my businesses, but kind of a big understanding. Hey, we're about to sign a $1 million plus contract. How
Yep.
does this look? Where does this make sense? I'm not just signing off a piece of paper that doesn't affect me at all. And hey, if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's deciding how we all eat.
That's right. That's right. And you're
Mhm.
right. All the tech side of all this stuff is like critical too, because you're right. I mean, stuff breaks all the time. And
Mhm.
to be able to, have that, I mean, email deliverability, what have you, that stuff all needs to work. It all works in conjunction with each other.
Yes. Yep.
That's the big
Yep.
thing. Yeah.
And having somebody who understands the marketing business growth aspect of the business, because I'm sure you've dealt with tech guys where it's like, oh, do this, do that, and you're like, well, that sounds like a solution to that problem, but it causes all these other problems that
Yeah.
decrease revenue
Yeah.
substantially.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's find the solution that actually doesn't hurt us.
That's right. That's
you
right.
know
Yeah. Yeah.
especially we joke about on the email delivery side, like all these consultants and stuff that we work with. We probably know more than most of these consultants at this point.
Yeah.
And their solution is like, well, you got to cut the list, you got to do that. It's like, all right, well, you're not the one who needs to survive off of that. I don't care if I have this amazing, open click-through rate, but I'm not making any money.
That's right.
So
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you look back, we'll just use Mark Baker as an
mm,
example. I love asking this question because a lot of times we don't always think about the real impact of what
mm,
comes from some of the relationships in our lives. But if you look at the relationship that you and Mark have had all these years, what is one thing that comes to mind for you that hands down would have never happened if
mm,
Mark wouldn't have come into your life?
mm. That's a good one. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of probably nice things I have in my life that play a large part to us being in business together.
Mhm.
Whether it's my home, my family, vacations, all this fun stuff. But I would say if I'm going to point to one thing, it would be stability.
Okay.
Not to say like we've definitely had ups and downs within the business, but like personally, we've always been able to connect and count on each other and
Uh-huh.
push.
Yeah.
Whether sales were up here, over here, over here, we kind of figured out like, hey, how do we work together and persevere to get to that next point? So I
Yeah.
always knew that there was stability in that relationship and that we're both rowing in the same direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Having that stability in a relationship where each of you just bring certain gifts, abilities, what have you, to the table, that you just complement each other. And it comes back to that whole alignment thing, that
Mhm.
you guys are just in alignment, which in turn allows you guys together to make a much bigger impact than either one of you could on your own, kind of a thing. you know
Absolutely. You
and
know.
that's, and like, I look at that, and because that's one of the things that I look at is, and what really inspires and motivates me is the thought of the impact that I'm able to have in this world by bringing my abilities and gifts to the table. But the other side of that is I can only do what I do with certain people. I
Mhm.
can't do what I do with just any old buddy. and they have to, have a certain level, have a certain foundation already laid. They have to be resourceful. They have to have resources, all of this kind of stuff. And with the right people, I can make a big impact. And I may never truly know the scope of that impact because it's hard to measure, but you just know that it's pretty dang big, and that's inspiring.
100%. And you'll never be able to measure that because
You
you
can't.
never know, like this one little offhanded email intro you did 20 years ago or 10 years ago.
That's right.
Those people are still making money together, or
Yep.
that person may have connected that person you introduced connected them with somebody else that did something big.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things I've always admired about you is this, and I think it's a good advice for all entrepreneurs is come from that position of giving first.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you give and then worry about if you keep giving, you're going to get back.
That's right. That's right. And that is it right there, Patrick, is you gotta, and I say when we show up just with the intention to contribute, to help, to serve, to pour into other people around us and stuff, you're absolutely right. It comes back, and it comes back in such a big way. And not always from the person that we pour in. I mean, it certainly can, but you just never know where it's going to come from. But I can tell you, after years of doing that, it comes back in so many ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Patrick, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. For anybody listening to this going like, man, Kev, I just really like Patrick. I love the way he shows up. Any resources, anything that, they might be able to check out to find out more about the work you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not a big social guy. I'm mostly like, even on like Facebook and stuff, that's like sharing pictures for the grandparents. Like I have some entrepreneurial friends on there, but they're all people that I do have a personal relationship or have hung out with. But if they want to go to patrickcoffey.com, which is my main site, they can email me there. I also have no problem giving out my personal email, which is Coffey UCF, like the school in Orlando, the UCF night. So coffeyucf@gmail.com.
Okay.
So if anybody wants to reach out, I'm pretty open. I'm happy to talk to people and help people on their entrepreneurial journey.
Awesome. Well, any last thing you want to share before we call it a wrap, Patrick?
No, I think that's it. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me,
Absolutely.
It was good for you to reach out, and it had been a while for us, even just in general. So it's cool for us to reconnect.
Absolutely, for sure. Well, Patrick, once again, thanks so much for taking the time to have this conversation. Really appreciate it and excited to share this with other entrepreneurs. So
cool. Can't wait for it to come out.